Welcome back, America. I want to grab the wheel with Mary Katharine Ham, the host of the Getting Hammered podcast, and get right to the heart of it. Hello, Mary Katharine. How are you?
I'm good.
Good. I listened to Getting Hammered last week on a long trundle, and I stopped when you described the nation's report card. And I then dug into the nation's report card, and it's awful. It's so bad. And I'm just going to focus on reading. Between 2022 and 2024, every student in America, the top 10%, the bottom 10%, they all dropped in reading except the bottom 10%, which were illiterate. You can't get more illiterate. So you talked about that. How much of a crisis is this?
I mean, it's a huge crisis, and unfortunately, it was a predictable crisis. And a lot of this obviously comes from schools shutting down during the pandemic, due to way overly cautious and sometimes teachers' union greed-influenced decisions at local levels in most major blue metro areas. They closed down schools for 18 months, and it turns out that that was a real problem, and that you get real learning loss, and that you don't get it back by 2022, and that by 2024 you're seeing even worse effects. Some of that is because the people who first encountered the shutdowns were kindergartners at the time of the pandemic. And now they're the fourth graders being tested, and they simply didn't get what they needed because their local educators told them Zoom is great, Zoom is fine. It was never true. You could tell it wasn't true. And now we are paying a price for it. And there are like very few bright spots out there for any progress being made. And I know people with really good intentions are trying to make progress, but we dug ourselves a hole that is very serious for this generation of children.
Now, Mary Katharine, when my daughter, who's your age, was going into fourth grade, she had a magnificent fourth grade teacher. In the first parent-teacher conference, he said to us, you know, grades 1 through 3 is when you learn to read, so that grades 4 and onward, you read to learn. And I always thought that was brilliant and elegant. You learn to read so you can read to learn. If people can't read, they're crippled for life. So we ought to, and I'm putting this out as a proposition, stop everything, test everyone, and aggregate people by roughly grade level. Yeah, I mean, you don't want to put an 8th grader with a 3rd grader, but you do want to put the 8th and the 6th and the 4th graders who are all at the same reading level, and do nothing but read. The fetching Mrs. Hewitt said to me last night, all they ought to be doing is reading until everyone can read, because nothing, and we got to go to year-round school. I mean, they're acting like nothing is wrong, but in fact, the whole edifice is collapsing. Am I alarmist?
No, you're not. You're not alarmist. The other thing that's happening is that there's how education works, pedagogy works, is that you get these trendy new curricula that come in. I mean, DEI and all the gender stuff is one thing, but there was at one point 20 or so years ago, a new curriculum that came in for reading that actually doesn't work. And it turned out basic phonics is much better at teaching kids to read. That's where you see the one bright spot in the NAEP in this national report card is in Louisiana, where they actually did implement a back to basics on both phonics and math skills for students. And it turns out you can make progress that way by doing a science-based, actually effective reading program. But in my personal experience, I took my kids off of Zoom school. They were 6 and 4. And I was like, I'm not putting on Zoom all day. And I only read to them and had them read to me for the end of that school year. And both of them learned to read. And since then, they have been reading to learn voraciously. So it really makes a huge difference. It seems too simple to work, and yet it works.
Oh, it does work. My grandkids are the age of your kids, and they were blessed to be deployed in England during the year of COVID shutdown. And England went to school, so they can read. And they've always been readers anyway, because the parents are readers and parents who read to their children. And now, let's do Mary Katharine Ham addresses every school board in America, every public school board in America. What do you say with your 3 minutes, Mary Katharine Ham, to every school board in America?
I say, particularly to those that closed down, because there were ones that were better behaved and opened more quickly. I say to them, stop doing nonsense and start doing basics. That is what taxpayers want. That's what they deserve. Use phonics, use basic math. Please get your students on a track of doing that instead of gender studies. And I know that the left tells you that all of these things don't take away from the mission, but we got finite time in school, my friends, and we got finite time to come back from this. And you have been wasting it, and wasting money, and wasting people and hires on DEI and gender ideology when you need to be teaching phonics. And it is totally out of line, and it hurts the least among these the worst. The data shows that those who were more far behind during 2020 and already had issues are the ones who have not been able to catch up. The top 10% does okay. They sort of hang in there. They get private tutors in 2020 and they do all those things. The other folks were not served. You need to be serving them. That's what the taxpayer dollars are for.
Okay, now Hugh comes up behind Mary Katharine Ham and says, and don't do anything else until you fix this. So I don't want anybody, obviously we need janitors and we need coaches because kids have got to run around and play sports. But we don't need people in the front office. We don't need curriculum specialists. We need teachers who are teaching to read, and we got to group kids by their ability so that they don't feel shamed and embarrassed because of the mistakes we made, but they have to read. And
they do.
They need to go to school year round. That's the one that's going to break the back of some teachers' unions. They got to take 3 weeks off 4 times a year, but they got to go year round.
No, they're asking for 4-day weeks around here. That's what they want. So
I must say, I do not know how we have one teacher in service day anywhere in America. A weather day may be acceptable if it's, the great blizzard of 2025. But how do they continue on like this, Mary Katharine?
Well, I think one of the things they did, unfortunately, in 2020, and the NAEP is the exception to this, is in a lot of districts they removed the normal testing data so that you could do oranges to oranges post-pandemic, and they sort of obscured the data because they knew they had messed this up and they didn't want us finding out how bad it was. I'm thankful for the National Report Card because it shows us what's actually happening. But a lot of these folks really thought that doing the other nonsense was enough to get them by and to excuse the fact that they had failed on academics. That's what they think. One of our school board members in my district was so happy in January of 2021 that they had gotten electric school buses. He had an electric school bus fleet. There were no children on those buses because there were no schools open. But he was really, really proud, and he still talks about it. And now they have a bunch more electric buses and a bunch of kids that can't read.
Mary Katharine, the Getting Hammered is always good, but that episode was superb. Thank you for your vigilance and your articulate expression of what has to happen if teachers really care about their kids. They will demand that from their principals and their school boards and their superintendents. Thank you, Mary Katharine Ham. Getting Hammered.
Thank you.